Hello everyone, so I'm Stephann Makri, self-proclaimed Prince of Serendip, and I'm delighted to talk to you today about the importance of supporting serendipitous discoveries through knowledge organisation. First, I'll introduce serendipity, its key elements, its promise for organisation, for knowledge organisation, and the process of serendipitous discovery. Then I'll move on to talk about some research that I've done on serendipity in the context of information acquisition, also known as information encountering. I'll give you an example of information encountering from my research and ask someone to share their example. Then I'll tell you a bit more about some of the research I've done on information encountering before arguing for the need for greater support for it by creating a knowledge infrastructure for surprising and meaningful discoveries. We'll then do an experimental creative exercise together where we'll think through and discuss possible ways of doing that, followed by a few minutes of discussion and questions, I hope. So, what is serendipity exactly? Well, it's more than a happy accident, which apparently I was. Holbrook writes that researchers love serendipity. They do not, however, understand it. Serendipity is not blind luck. Serendipity is sagacity regarding opportunity. So serendipity is inherently positive, and events must be considered and framed as positive to be considered serendipitous. It's also therefore individually subjective. What matters is events are considered serendipitous for the individual experiencing them, but that subjectivity does make them tricky to design for. We can create opportunities for serendipity, but can't guarantee it. Burroughs and Verhoeven say that serendipity is in the eye of the human beholder and cannot be manufactured. The serendipity is where unexpected circumstances trigger an aha moment of insight that results in a valuable, unanticipated outcome. So its key ingredients, therefore, are unexpectedness, insight or sagacity, and an unsought happy ending. We can use those key ingredients of unexpectedness, insight, and value as a framework for classifying potentially serendipitous experiences to help us decide whether an experience is serendipitous, and if so, just how serendipitous. We can also use the key ingredients to map out a serendipity space based on the amounts of unexpectedness, insight, and value perceived to be involved in the experience. So some experiences can be considered more serendipitous than others, some purer, others more dilute. In this talk, I'll be focusing on serendipity in the context of human information interaction. That's unexpectedly finding useful or interesting information. And I'm going to refer to this using the term information encountering. Information encountering is a good thing because it can propel us in new and exciting directions, surprising and delighting us along the way. It can expand our knowledge and interests. It can also spark creativity and innovation through the creation and exploitation of new insights. That's why I argue it's really important to organize knowledge in a way that creates opportunities for exciting information encounters. To better understand the nature of serendipity as a type of experience, I interviewed 28 interdisciplinary researchers about their experiences of serendipity, not just through research, but in everyday life. Patterns in their memorable examples of serendipity gave rise to a process model of serendipity. This was the first empirical model of serendipity as a broad phenomenon. There's been some more that have been created since, but they complement it rather than contradict it. And what we see here is unexpected circumstances and insight kind of driving a mental connection or a bisociation. But then that's not the end of it. Then the individual needs to kind of think, well, what might come of this? So through a process of forwards reflection, they project the value that might come out of the serendipitous circumstances, the unexpected circumstances. They take some action to exploit the value from that situation. And that then results in this kind of valuable and anticipated outcome. It's through a process of backwards reflection that they get to kind of then think of this and label this as serendipity. Here's an example of a serendipity story told to me by a filmmaker, which can also be considered an information encounter. I have been granted an award to make an experimental music and film performance piece. I decided to base the piece on the figure of the fallen angel Lucifer and conducted research on peacock feathers as an emblem of Lucifer and the idea of the eyes as a gateway to the soul. One day I was taking a journey on the London Underground from Angel to Highgate. As I went down the escalator at Angel, I noticed an ad that contained a large eye. So you see the unexpected circumstances coming in. This image sparked a connection to the eyes on the peacock's feathers that I'd been researching, and through that to the myth of Lucifer. So we see a mental connection here. I then made several mental connections between the tube journey I was about to make and the legend of Lucifer's fall. For example, I was descending through the underground tunnel just as Lucifer descended from heaven. I was also traveling from a station called Angel to one called Highgate via another station called Archway. So we see more and more mental connections. I'd written a story of Lucifer's fall that had direct parallels to the names of these stations, and I realized it wasn't too difficult to make a link between the station names and my research on the Lucifer myth. So we see some insight happening. I rapidly got the idea that I could structure the whole piece around the structure of this journey, from the descent into the tube at Angel to the re-emergence at Highgate. So we see some projection of the value. I adopted this structure for the piece, so here's some exploitation of the value, which featured a film installation made from footage from that particular train journey. More exploiting the value. This piece was given several performances and drew some very strong responses from audiences, as well as positive feedback from its commissioners and funders. So a valuable, unanticipated outcome. In the research that story came from, I interviewed 14 creative professionals, including an artist, composer, comedian, chef, choreographer, musician, and I asked them whether they thought there was anything that they did that increased the likelihood of them experiencing serendipity. And they discussed several serendipity strategies, some of which we can reflect on in terms of supporting knowledge organization. For example, vary your routine. A photographer varied her routine by consciously taking different routes to work each day, and when visiting a new city, set herself arbitrary goals, such as visit a market, in order to see what happened along the way. Digital information environments might support users in varying their routines by injecting more diversity into recommendations of people, places, documents, or information sources. There's also the potential to more closely integrate search and browse functionality to encourage users to browse related information after conducting a goal-directed search. Be observant. The composer asserted that being observant could be supported by attuning oneself to things of interest so as to notice triggers in the environment related to those interests. He described this as a preparedness to be open to seeing conjunctions. So digital information environments can augment users' observation skills by drawing their attention to new and potentially interesting information or information sources, such as through recommendations ranked at least partly based on diversity rather than relevance, or novel information visualization approaches. Relax your boundaries. A visual artist said, if you have rigid boundaries of areas of knowledge, between areas of knowledge or areas of the world, whether intellectually or physically, you'll cut off certain possibilities. Even literally, if you obey no entry signs every time you see them, having a healthy disrespect for boundaries is a pretty important attitude for encouraging serendipity. Digital information environments can introduce users to unexpected and potentially useful information from different domains that maybe they were not previously familiar with, help them gravitate to new areas of interest or experience, and make connections between pieces of information that they hadn't previously thought were related. Look for patterns. A participatory theatre maker told me there was a 90-year-old potter that she had worked with that made big thematic statements. He said to her, people think there's patterns in the world. There isn't, it's chaos. But what we're here to do is look for patterns. That's our purpose. Digital information environments might support people in noticing patterns by leveraging a combination of metadata, knowledge graphs, and LLM-based approaches, which hopefully we'll cover later in the creative discussion. They might also highlight unusual, potentially anomalous documents, web pages, content. And finally, seize opportunities. It's not enough for unexpected circumstances to lead to an aha moment of insight. The most controllable and therefore potentially the most designable aspect of serendipity may be in supporting users to turn these unexpected circumstances into a valuable outcome. So now your turn. Can I have somebody's example of serendipity? So that could be when encountering information. So it'd be great if someone has an example of coming across unexpectedly some useful or interesting information. But if not, it can be a serendipity story in everyday life. So would someone like to share with somebody online? You can just unmute Otherwise, I'll see for a show of hands in the room. Let's go with Martin.
I enjoy playing organs, big organs. Every organ is different. So when you sit at an organ for the first time, you have no idea what it's going to sound like.
Okay, so
therefore, organists are continually being serendipitous, because on a large organ, you have over 1 billion combinations of all those things you've allowed. And the trick for an organist is to control their serendipitousness, to say, hey, that is a nice sound.
I can make it sound nice based on how I'm kind of...
The reality of putting out all the stops is, ugh. You know, it's not a good... So if you like, I'm a part of a profession that capitalizes on serendipity. And although we don't think it in that way, that's what we're doing every time we play a different organ.
Do you ever capitalize on kind of unexpected sounds where...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, okay. French organs have a particular type of sound. You cannot duplicate that on an English organ, for that matter, a German. So you have to do a near match. And then you suddenly think, gee, but I could use that, which I'm using for French music, in a totally different context, to solo something out or whatever. So you're storing them away, which is useless because you're going to play a different organ next week.
So chance is favouring the prepared mind here, because you've got so much domain knowledge where when you hear something unexpected, you're then able to turn it around and say, this would be what could make a really nice sound.
The next thing is the people in the audience haven't got a clue.
And this just happens as we go along. It reminds me of when I interviewed a jazz improviser, and just capitalizing on mistakes was such an important part of his repertoire. One more example, please.
This is an example about lack of serendipity, I suppose.
Lack of.
Does anyone remember when Google first came out, they used to have a button that said, I'm feeling
lucky. And it was never anything about feeling lucky. Do you know what it did?
No.
It took you to the first hit. It took you to the top hit. Therefore, the least kind of random. I could understand if it took you to some kind of random number of the hits that you wouldn't go beyond page 3 or something. Okay, thanks very much for those. So let's come back then to serendipity in the context of unexpectedly finding useful or interesting information. Information encountering isn't about seeking information, it's where information seeks you. It's about information discovery rather than information seeking. So search is one way that we can discover information, but so is browsing. But in my view, browsing is tremendously undervalued in digital information environments. Search is already an overabundant mode of information acquisition, and the current LLM-based chatbot paradigm mimics a natural language search process, even if currently it's not quite the same as search. And this paradigm points towards integrating answers to our complex natural language questions into digital information environments, further overshadowing browsing as an important means of finding and serendipitously encountering information. So that's why I think that providing support and more support for browsing and seamlessly transitioning between searching and browsing is essential. So what are possible ways of encountering information? We might discover information when we're looking for something else, perhaps when we're actively searching or browsing for information on one topic and come across information on a related, partly related, or even seemingly unrelated topic. We might encounter information when we're not looking for anything in particular. That's when we're browsing or when we're surfing the web in the original meaning of the phrase. And it's also possible to encounter information when not looking for information at all, such as when I noticed the Serendipity Gallery in Chicago as I walked past it. Sander Erdeles and I synthesized existing conceptual work on serendipity in the context of information acquisition to provide a stronger understanding of the nature, scope, and process of information encountering, and to encourage researchers, including ourselves, to use consistent terminology when discussing serendipity in an information context. Core to the process of information encountering is noticing a promising informational stimulus in the environment, stopping or suspending the tasks that you were doing before you noticed the stimulus, acquiring and examining the information to make sure that it's useful, sometimes conducting follow-up seeking to explore the information, and often capturing and storing the information, then using and or sharing it with others. My student Lily Buckley and I looked at how the process of information encountering could be disrupted, resulting in missed opportunities for creating knowledge or insight. Disruption factors included a reluctance to invest time and effort in engaging with encountered information, deviate from the goal-directed information seeking task in which the encounter was embedded, multitask, risk dead ends, engage in a feared to be never-ending information exploration cycle, and a reluctance to trust emotion over logic. These factors individually and collectively demonstrate encountering can instigate a highly uncertain cost-benefit trade-off, which can result in encounters acting cautiously by returning to less risky active information seeking. This suggests a need to design to encourage productive encounters by reducing the uncertainty of deciding whether to engage with encountered information and making it easier to return to the active seeking task if disruption occurs. We also found evidence of this trade-off when investigating information encountering in physical libraries and labeled it as seeking encountering tension. This tension on the one hand entices people towards a relatively high risk, high reward activity of exploring new information they encounter, serendipitously, and on the other hand, draws them back towards a relative safety of goal-directed information seeking. Design challenges for both physical and digital information environments include how to offer the users the right amount of opportunity for information encountering, when that's likely to vary based not only on their information goals, but also personal factors like their openness to exploration and their mood. There's also the question of how the design of information environments influences encountering and how we can best design to support or perhaps sometimes even discourage encountering. Picking up on how to create opportunities for information encountering through knowledge organisation. This is Libraria, a small bookshop in London's East End, which according to its website was deliberately designed to maximise serendipity. So my student Yichun Chen and I were intrigued by this claim and conducted an observation of the bookshop, of how the bookshop supports and hinders people in seeking and encountering books. But first, a bit about Libraria's design. It's got continuous shelving, which you can see here from floor to ceiling, running along both walls of the bookshop, with shallow section dividers and a strategically placed mirror that gives the impression of the shelves continuing to the distance. So the mirror is actually not in shot, it's in front of us. It was designed based on the Library of Babel with its never-ending shelves, and it includes some shelf-embedded seating, which you can see up there, to encourage customers to linger, and has a very unconventional design organization scheme. Rather than being organized by subject or author, as we might expect, it's organized by broad themes, such as ways of seeing, enchantment for the disenchanted, and bad feminism. Some books are showcased by being placed on shelves or tables with, so there's the seating, there's the organization labels, shelves or tables with their covers exposed. And it also includes author-curated sections and recommendations by members of the incubator that funded the bookshop. So in this bookshop, participants found it almost impossible to find specific known items or topics, other than ironically by accident. However, all unexpectedly encountered interesting books, mostly when freely exploring, but also during goal-directed seeking. Some aspects of the environment were key in facilitating encountering, particularly the broad, ambiguous organization scheme and the book cover exposure. While the other design features didn't facilitate serendipity, follow-up interviews provided evidence that they might if they were designed differently. So these findings highlight that even seemingly innocuous design decisions, such as shallow shelf dividers, you can see the shelf dividers here, also translucent, which makes it a little bit difficult to see the categories. These kind of these kinds of design decisions that are seemingly innocuous can actually have a large impact on information encountering. as participants lacked the information they needed to understand those features that did not facilitate encountering. So it suggests that it might not be enough to design serendipity triggers only to be noticed. They actually have to be understandable and considered useful and in order to ultimately be used. But it wasn't so straightforward. So participants found it difficult to understand the purpose of the features that did facilitate encountering too. So how are the shelves and tables organized? What do these section labels mean? And why is this cover face forward and not the others? Encountering, though, occurred even despite this lack of understanding, actually highlighting the versatility of Liberia's design and the resilient nature of encountering. So this suggests that designing features for understandability may often be desirable, but not always necessary to facilitate serendipity. How transparent or opaque those design features should be in conveying their purpose to users needs some more research, maybe in different types of environment for different types of user or task. And while Liberia strongly enabled exploration and encountering, it poorly facilitated goal-directed finding. And this again highlights that tension between this time findability and discoverability. It's a kind of variation on the seeking encountering tension. Optimizing findability over discoverability may enable goal-directed seeking, but inhibit undirected seeking and encountering. Conversely, Liberia was designed to optimize discoverability over findability, turning that kind of traditional relevance-based approach on its head. But its design enabled undirected seeking and encountering, but inhibited goal-directed seeking. So optimistically, we might see this as an opportunity to balance structure with a lack of it when designing digital information environments that are intended to support both findability and discoverability. Or more pessimistically, we might interpret Liberia's poor support for goal-directed finding as an indication that striking this balance might be really difficult, idealistic, or sometimes unrealistic. But it may be possible to design environments that provide some features that are better supporting finding and others better at supporting exploration, and that allow users to shift that kind of find, explore emphasis at will. And these findings all prompt us to think about how best to strike a useful balance between supporting findability and discoverability in information environments. So I said that serendipity by definition is a positive experience and beneficial, but it might also have a dark side. So in our research on the role that information plays in changing people's views on key political, social, and environmental topics, we found that most view changes were sparked or catalyzed by information encounters, mostly on social media. It might be something to do with the fact that lots of people now really get their news on social media rather than through other channels. Given the potential for information to manipulate, I see the Netflix documentary, The Great Hack, on the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal. There's a risk that charming information encounters might in certain circumstances act as Trojan horses, allowing views based on inaccurate or accurate but misleading information to take root. And a PhD student will be starting with me soon to focus on this. Some final food for thought on designing for serendipity. In 2006, McKean lamented that the concept of serendipity is endangered because of our increasing use of search engines and our decreasing use of physical libraries, where browsing and shelves provide strong affordances for serendipity. In 2023, then, what does the integration of LLM-based approaches to information seeking mean for serendipity? Will providing synthesized information in direct response to users' complex questions kill serendipity by taking away the opportunity for human sagacity? Or will it augment rather than replace the process of human insight? This remains to be seen, but my view is that human agency and discovery is essential and should be nurtured through transparency and traceability rather than entirely automated. So my broad argument is that in the field of human information interaction, research on search has often overshadowed that of browsing. This is despite the importance of browsing for supporting people when they don't necessarily know what they're looking for, and its potential for facilitating surprising, meaningful discoveries as a result. And now new search paradigms such as AI-facilitated dialogues and automated information synthesis approaches also threaten to steal the limelight from browsing as an important serendipity engine. I think the knowledge organization community has a vital role to play in supporting all forms of knowledge discovery, including more widely supporting browsing. And I think that the community already has the necessary building blocks to do it. So in the final part of this session, I'm going to attempt to illustrate this in a risky creative exercise where I'll ask you what might make connections surprising and meaningful and how to facilitate them through better knowledge organization.
You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. I think 15 according to my. So Burroughs and Verhoeven in this nice book of serendipity science say we should focus on organizing, not on organizing knowledge, but on organizing the paths by which different pieces of knowledge can be connected. And so that's what we're going to try and do in this exercise. So imagine we're designing Serendipity Scholar, a new digital platform to help scholars make serendipitous connections between academic papers. So hopefully this is a domain that many of you are familiar with. Let's think first about kind of what might be some useful important entities or relationships we should be thinking about then in the domain of academic papers. So starting with the obvious ones, so papers, authors, keywords, publication venue, sites and cited by. What else? Just shout out, including online. What others might be good? Co-authors, so kind of co-authorship relationships. Journals, so like where this was published.
Institutions.
Yes, key up.
Oh, sorry, I go first.
Participation in forums.
Okay, so like
Related to certain.
so thinking about like where is this kind of like where a publication venue might be linked to? So like
Social network, I was thinking more.
oh, okay, so
Groups, discussing certain issues, then all members of the groups.
okay, so social networks that particular authors might be members of. There's another one at the back there.
What's hip?
Okay, so like what's trending kind of thing.
Yeah, I just care about what's in the domain.
What's hip in the domain. Okay, and then can we think about any connections that are kind of meaningful, but kind of less explored? So for example, papers by authors from different disciplines who have used the same data collection or analysis method, or authors who have cited my co-authors. So like, try and think out of the box now a little bit and think what could be really potentially useful connections that we don't often think about when we are thinking about this kind of domain.
There is one connection in when building vocabularies. We always make sure to insert a lot of associative relationship between concepts across different disciplines.
Associative relationships.
So far, these are not exploited by the information retrieval systems very much, so you can't browse them. But do you think that maybe with linked data, this will change a lot when these knowledge organization systems are actually linkable, and all elements of relationships are actually available for exploiting and harvesting and linking, not just across different vocabularies, different databases, different.
So opportunities for linked data to bridge kind of information sources and provide much more linkage. Maybe one more kind of example.
Out of work activities such as, you know, if you like walking.
Yeah, like do you share another interest that might you know, or conversely, does the paper kind of share an interest that I have? So I remember discovering some really nice work on information behavior when hiking. Just because I thought how bad I am at using technology when hiking, how much I endanger myself. But anyway, that's another story. Okay, so we're kind of starting to think about more examples. I'm on roughly the 30-minute mark, and I do want to save some time for questions, so I'll skip through a few bits of this. So we've thought a little bit about kind of metadata links here, so possible meaningful connections based on metadata links. I also want to suggest that so we kind of touched on linked data, but also there might be ways of kind of leveraging knowledge graphs or other types of structured link. Anyone got an idea here?
There's different kinds of, I've got a paper on this that's just been published a few months ago with George McGregor on PIDs. So there's different kinds of IDs, so not just the URL for articles, but also sort of permanent identifiers for authors.
Permanent identifiers. How do you see that might be useful in helping to create serendipitous connections?
If each person, you know, in the ideal world of linked data, that if every entity is a link, a permanent link in some way, and then you can make connections between these people study serendipity, these people work at this university, and then hopefully links get created. So the IDs are relatively new for some people.
It sounds like they can also provide a very kind of permanent and authoritative kind of identifier that would enable us to make these connections with some certainty.
Yeah, so if you're a researcher and you get married and you change your name, people can still find you.
Excellent. So I'm not going to ask you this one, but we could be thinking about new forms of recommendation that are not exclusively diversity based. I think that I won't say anything about this now, but obviously this is a key theme here, thinking about how do we actually create the infrastructure that means that people want to browse more when it's appropriate rather than search. Social links and data feeds, we heard kind of an example of social links, but we could be thinking about how to kind of do that through feeds. So really I want to kind of open you up to thinking about like how can you put to work the things that you know already from your discipline to help to achieve these kind of potential for serendipitous discovery.